community or audience? Which one should you build as a brand? That's the focus of today's episode of Play It Back.
Play it once, Sam. For all time's sake.
Hi, I'm Kevin, part of the celebrity power couple, Kevin and Tim. Right now, we're trying to figure out what our celeb couple name is. Is it Kevithy? Is it Timovan? I'm not quite sure yet. We'll let you know. We've got to do some workshops, do some research around this. Anyway, before we dig into this topic and dig into today's episode, earlier this week, Tim published a fantastic retrospective on Abercrombie & Fitch and their campaign to only advertise to pretty people. Problematic? Yeah. Does it make me feel yucky just thinking about it? Yeah. And critics say it backfired, but Tim argues that an intense focus on their core persona is what propelled the brand to success in the first place, and abandoning it is what killed it. Check it out. It's at playitback.co. Anyway, for today's episode, I'm going to mix it up. The other day I was talking to a colleague who was, very conveniently for this segment, mapping out a strategy for developing a community around his product. And as we walked through his plan, I said, look, I don't think you're looking for a community. You're just looking for a big audience. And then he looked at me like I'd killed a puppy. First of all, audience building isn't a bad thing. I don't know why it's gotten such a dirty name lately. The concept of building your own community is huge right now. And yeah, for good reason. An engaged and invested community is great, but it's not the only way to skin a cat, so don't write off audience too quickly. Now, what is the difference between community and audience? It's pretty nuanced, and everyone seems to have a different take when it comes to the business sense. But for starters, Chris Brogan once put it well. The difference between an audience and a community is which way the chairs are facing. You know, you get it. An audience's chairs are all facing the speaker. A community's chairs are all in the circle. My chairs always flip backwards because I'm cool as Anyway, I asked a bunch of you on LinkedIn and Twitter how you define the difference between audience and community. The responses were fantastic, some really cool insights, some great conversations. Thank you to all of you who mixed it up. But for the most part, it boiled down to one theme. Building an audience sets the brand as the authority. A community has no central authority. It's about members working together. You know, when it works, and it doesn't always work. To build a good community takes the same energy and effort as building a product, except it's way less predictable than code. And the prevailing thought is that an audience comes first, and then you can mold that audience into a community like Swayze into me. Anyway, in an altruistic sense, sure, turning your audience into a community feels like a warm and fuzzy plan. I get it. But what about what you need for the business? If you're running a business, you're not just building a community for fun. What's the bottom line value that you're getting out of it? Especially now as we're facing down a recession and you're going to have to justify every cent you spend. Your board isn't going to sit down at the next board meeting and say, is your community thriving? No, they're going to ask you about revenue. So what's your why? Why build a community? And before you say it, all the other brands are doing it isn't the right answer here. Look, if all the other brands started doing drugs, would you? I didn't think so. Nerds. Anyway, here's a great example of a good why. I know a lot of the folks who are building PLG or product-led growth software right now, and for the most part, these teams are starting with community. In fact, according to my guy Adam Schoenfeld of PeerSignal, 43% of PLG companies have a community. Across B2B tech, that percentage drops to 25%. Now, why is that? Because the way they are thinking about PLG is new. It's a new category, and they need a community to not only validate what they're building, but help shape that category. So the tools in that category across the board become essential line items on a balance sheet. I want to give a quick shout out to folks who are doing this really well. Today I saw Dave Rigotti of Inflection.io literally poll LinkedIn to help with a positioning statement that wasn't landing the way he thought it would. What you're looking for at that stage is engagement. And to me, that's the difference between audience and community. Are you looking for reach or are you looking for engagement? Now, I can't help but compare this topic to the early days of social media. In 2010-ish, my job title was community manager, but I wasn't hired to build or manage a community. My goals had nothing to do with community. It all had to do with reach. Really, I was in audience development. I was in inbound marketing. But around that same time, there was a brand that was building community, and arguably, they were doing so better than any tech company that came before them or after. Don't worry, since you're all so thirsty to talk community, I am going to touch on that. But I want to caveat that by saying this story isn't about community. It's about how sometimes you can already have the best community in the world, and you still need that audience. So here is the story of actually, hang on a second. I need to warn you now, this episode isn't about a campaign. I know the show is generally about these paradigm-shifting creative campaigns. Our tagline, literally game tape for your favorite creative campaigns. But at its best, marketing creative isn't siloed to a campaign. Hell, it's not siloed to marketing. And if yours is, then please, I implore you, just donate your marketing budget to me. I promise I will put it to much better use. I'm going to hire Jodeci to play a set at my next barbecue. It's going to be fantastic. Okay, so with that broad, not campaign-specific scope in mind, now along with the song Come and Talk to Me in my head, today I want to take a look at one specific execution that I can't call a campaign because it's so much bigger than that. So submitted for the approval of the Damn it, I wrote this before I saw Tim's episode last week and he already did that. Anyway, here's how HubSpot grew a brand new audience overnight. Title needs some work. I'm still really hung up on this Midnight Society thing. I was really excited for this. HubSpot. The company started as inbound marketing software, and it's leveraged community better than any brand in the world. They developed their community the same way PLG is doing, as they were developing the product over a decade ago. Inbound was a new category. They were creating it. People were figuring out how to do it, but there was this appetite that they saw in the market. HubSpot championed inbound when literally no one else was, and they helped shape the narrative through participation in that community, which they called inbound. Now this, along with a religious belief in content marketing, grew into one of the most massive communities and one of the biggest marketing conferences in the world. More than 100,000 people take HubSpot courses each month. 300,000 have received HubSpot certifications. Now today there's sub-communities across the HubSpot ecosystem, and it is an ecosystem. And trust me, you'll know when you see these folks too. HubSpot community members bleed orange. They're like that guy in your rec league softball team that can't stop talking about rec league softball. He's watching YouTube videos of the best shift strategies for left-handed batters and telling you all about the dominant pitchers that you're going to face the next week in your slow pitch beer league softball team. Meanwhile, you just signed up so you could crush a few beers in the dugout with your friends and rip some dingers. This metaphor got away from me. It's summertime. I apologize, but you get it. HubSpot community members, super into it. But those folks have mostly been marketers, and HubSpot's offering has grown. The product is a full-scale CRM now with tools for marketers, but also for sales, for service teams, for ops, you name it. So counter to LinkedIn dogma, they're beyond being able to lean on their community. They need to build an audience. So how do you build your audience beyond the marketers that have passionately rallied around you since the early days? Simple. In 1997, Jon Favreau, who you probably know either from Swingers or from Avengers and Star Wars acclaim, had a short stint on the sitcom Friends, where he played a billionaire who was trying to date Monica, and she wasn't into it. First of all, he was charming as hell. I'm not sure what she was thinking. Second of all, he couldn't get her to engage because she was already a part of this other community. So he literally bought her attention.
I don't know.
Why not?
I don't want to encourage this kind of behavior.
One meal. That's all I'm asking for, please. We go out, we eat, and if you don't have a good time, I'll give you 10 grand, we call it even.
And let's be honest, it would have worked in real life. We all said we would date him, and don't pretend for a second that you were too cool for Friends. It was a phenomenon, okay? And to bring it all together, that's what HubSpot did. They needed a new audience, so they bought it. Which you can do when you're HubSpot. In 2021, HubSpot grew revenue by 47% year over year, and it raked in $1.3 billion. Jon Favreau's character wasn't even pulling that kind of coin. A little over a year ago, in 2021, HubSpot acquired the media company, The Hustle. Not the first time a tech company's bought a media company. This has happened on smaller scales before, but HubSpot is massive. And it's already built on content. It's built on inbound. It is a media company. Why did it make sense to do something like this? Hell, they already drive 360 million annual visits to their web properties. The value of their organic traffic has been estimated at 25 million per month. That is bigger than most major media companies. But the challenge HubSpot faced was one very few SaaS companies get to. They'd reached the end of the line, market saturation. You'll be hard-pressed to find a marketer that fits their ideal persona who hasn't interacted with HubSpot's content, or at the very least, heard of them. Add that to the fact that they have products appealing to folks outside of marketing now. Co-founder and CEO Brian Halligan and mostly CMO Kip Bodnar and the marketing team had their work cut out for them. Luckily, as one HubSpotite? I feel like I should know this. As one HubSpot employee told me, Kip operates in another stratosphere. And I can't argue with that. Here's a clip of Kip in 2018 talking about his favorite marketer.
Kevin Shively, ladies and gentlemen.
So Halligan, Bodnar, HubSpot in February 2021 acquired The Hustle. It's estimated that the sale was around 27 million, so 1 month of their organic traffic. But Hustle CEO Sam Parr says he's taken the sale info to his grave. This move is one of my favorite creative plays, though. A software company buys a media company. Not the first time it's happened, but this one was perfect. I'll tell you why. The Hustle had the attention of the audience that HubSpot wanted. They didn't need to, or likely as a publicly traded company beholden to shareholders, have time to become a trusted and active part of that community. That could come later. The Hustle made HubSpot an overnight celebrity. To figure out how, we got to talk about the Hustle's audience and the community they were a part of. Let's go to the scoreboard. Mo!
They got to hear the rules from Mo. Mo?
The Hustle has between 5 and 8 million annual visitors to their main site. 500,000 to 2 million annual visits go to their Trends, their paid site, each year. And they have over 11,000 members in various niche Facebook groups. But all that pales in comparison to the fact that they have 1.5 million newsletter subscribers, 1.5 million people who have opted into their content. And who are these folks? Here's some data that Foundation shared from SparkToro. These are the keywords from bios of HubSpot followers. Predominantly marketing. Now let's compare that to keywords of the Hustle's follower bios. Co-founder, product, startup, growth, strategy, investor. If HubSpot wanted to tap into a new demo, they could do way worse. Also, according to Foundation, the Hustle was a key part of that community. 48% of the Hustle's referral traffic came from Y Combinator's Hacker News, which is a community forum used by startup founders and folks like that. HubSpot, who appeals to SMBs, has tools that serve the entire go-to-market motion, not just marketing. So these folks who are responsible for that entire motion are an ideal audience. Full circle here. HubSpot acquires The Hustle because they had already done the work on the community side and they were shaping that category. The Hustle has become a leading authority for entrepreneurs, startup founders, sales leaders, strategy leaders, etc. An audience that HubSpot didn't have access to because they weren't a staple of that community. Now, we can't all afford to buy an audience, nor should we. If you aren't already a staple with a large moat around a core part of your business, this can be a really risky move. But there are so many reasons I love it. As we ask ourselves, should we build a community? The lesson that I take from it is this. Community is critical when you're establishing product market fit, when you're building a category. Once you're already the authority in that niche, audience building becomes the essential focus. And when that plateaus, you find a new audience and you date them both like Zach Morris running between tables at a restaurant.
Fortunately, I always have a backup plan.
Savvy play. Tip of the hat to Kip, to Halligan, to HubSpot, to The Hustle, to Sam Parr. These unconventional moves are some of my favorites. Thank you all for playing this one back with me. I would love to hear your thoughts on community versus audience and when it makes sense to focus on one or the other. We're going to be back next week with another episode, but if you enjoyed this one, share it with your friends. Talk to us in the comments. That way, we can call this a community. And I want to put another CTA in front of you. If you have a favorite campaign, come and talk to me about it. We aren't going to have guests all the time, but if you have a cool story, I want to hear it, especially if that campaign isn't your own and we just get to geek out about somebody else's really cool work. This isn't a promotional show. Speaking of promotion, subscribe at playitback.co or to my LinkedIn newsletter. We'll see you next time.